Hello, everybody. I am going to talk about Chapter 9, Modernism in Europe. We're getting into almost contemporary times here. I know it seems like a long time ago. 1900 to 1945, which means World War One, World War Two will start during this time period. So we're going to see a lot of upheaval and chaos in the world. And of course, artists are going to respond to this. Um, so the first half of the 20th century is, of course, worldwide, this chaos. Two global wars will happen: communism, fascism, Nazism. The Great Depression will happen in this country. We're going to see artists respond to this just as they have in other chapters, like the Romanticists. And just to show you how quickly all this, comes about, all of these separate little time periods. We're not going to study all of them, don't worry. But really, art is shifting. Some artists will go from one style to another because they'll, outlive one that's no longer relevant, and they'll switch to another style. And so the art world becomes very fluid at this time. We're going to start to use this term avant-garde in these chapters, which refers to art made during the opening decades of the 20th century. And this is a term that is adapted from the military. Um, the avant-garde would be the troops that were sent ahead to scout out the positions. So these are people at the front. These are people that are going ahead, moving art forward. And that's why they're called avant-garde. So they're ahead of their time, and they, don't follow the established norms. So the first art style we're going to look at is the Fauves, Fauvism, or the Fauves as they were called. This is a French movement. It's influenced by the Post-Impressionists, Seurat and Van Gogh. Three are students of Gustave Moreau. Um, they are displaying their artwork together, and a critic calls them fauves, which means wild beasts. These four artists here: Matisse, Vlaminck, Derain, and Rouault. And what the critic meant was it has this sort of violent, expressive use of color, painted like a wild beast. But the fauves loved the term, and they, adapt it and use it. They call themselves the fauves, the fauvism. And they had all studied at this guy's studio, and he's, pretty academic with a little bit of an impressionist flair. Moreau, he's in your chapter. I don't really cover him. He's in the Symbolists chapter. Um, so this is an artwork by Matisse, and you can see maybe what the critic was talking about. This is Woman with Hat. And he is doing, what the post-impressionists were doing, using color in a non-descriptive way. He's doing what the impressionists did, letting the paint sit on top of the subject, visibly just, using big slashes of green on the face and leaving them there. An abstracted hat here. So he's being very expressive with his color, like Gauguin. He's being very painterly with his, brush strokes like Monet or Van Gogh. So, of course, the avant-garde doesn't really happen without all of the other people that we've looked at in the last chapter. This is Matisse's portrait of Madame Matisse. He often painted his wife. He liked to give her green stripes. This is actually called the green stripe. And this is his Joy of Life from your textbook. So he's using an academic um, subject. We've seen plenty of the female nude. We've seen nudes in the park. We just saw Manet doing his version of it. This could be like Titian or Giorgione or Renoir, like all these nudes that we've seen in Matisse's Fauves style. So these heightened colors and big patches of color that the Impressionists were doing, but really not much like this. Matisse also likes to use the element of line. A lot of his figures are sort of like drawings on top of a painting in a way. And he did like to call attention to line. He often used a heavy black outline or just a delicate little line. He loved the contour. And this is a quote from him. The thing about Matisse and Picasso and most artists that we look at, they are quoted often. They wrote a lot extensively on art. They had some pretty lofty ideas for what they were doing. So he says that he's rejecting imitative color with pure colors, using pure colors to get stronger reactions. You know, an artist can express his feelings through the composition and decorative and color elements in his paintings. This is his red studio. And you can see he likes to sort of give it a big field of color and then make a line drawing on top of it. And this is the one from your book. This is called Harmony in Red, or the Red Room. Um, and he's doing what we've seen other artists do a lot, like Gauguin with his heavy outlines and sort of flattening of everything. But Matisse is just walking away from this sort of like 3D pictorial device that had started in the Renaissance. He's flattening everything. He's making the wallpaper and the tablecloth match, so you kind of read them all as one vertical element. So this table doesn't, the tablecloth doesn't round over the table and go back. It's just vertically going up in the same direction as the wallpaper. The figure here is like just a cutout, just barely blocked by the table here. This chair is a little out of scale for this woman. Is this a window? Is this a painting? And it doesn't really matter because everything's like puzzle pieces. It is like decorative wallpaper in a way, the way he treats the pictorial space. And in the book, he talks about finding just the right color. He had done, the whole thing in blue with red patterns, and he decided that did not express what he wanted to. So he did it all over in red to create this harmony, and that's what he named it. Derain is another Fauvist artist. He worked with Matisse. He displayed his stuff, and you can see he has even more heightened color. He's, quite a colorist in his idea of contrast, and also kind of flattening everything, very decorative, if you want to think about them more like they're sort of like puzzle pieces all put together. It's not one big space, it's like big areas kind of put next to other big areas. And this is Vlaminck, who, also painted with them, probably very influenced by the Post-Impressionists. Rouault is another one. They don't cover these in your book. I just like to show them because Rouault was very religious, so he adopts the Fauvist style for his religious paintings. Over to Germany, where lots of things are going to be happening soon. The Expressionists. We had seen Edvard Munch already. He's a Northern Expressionist. And these two other groups are German Expressionism. We're going to have the Die Brücke, which means the bridge, and the Blue Rider, which is Kandinsky and others. So let's look at the Brücke. Is the thing about these groups is they all have what's called manifestos or some kind of writing, treaties, whatnot, where they are, instead of just meeting at the cafes like the Impressionists, they're literally writing down their manifesto. These are the things we believe about what art should be. And this here is a quote from Nietzsche, which is what the Die Brücke, the bridge people, followed. And Nietzsche calls for all young people coming together, carry the future in us, etc. Um, break away from established forces, which is not a new thing. We saw the Salon de Refusé trying to do that as well. But really, they're trying to break away from more than just the salon. They're trying to, get away from established society in a way. We look at Kirchner first. This is the one that's in your book. This is called Street Dresden. And Kirchner gives us a glimpse of like what it is to live in a crowded city, in the frenzied urban city. You see all the crowds. There seems to be like a big negative space here. We see this sort of horrific portraits of these women. This, small girl, whatever she's doing, holding flowers, ironically, but looking very menacing or threatening. And he's sort of responding to this idea that we're going to see American artists do in the Depression, and that is, being alienated even in a crowd. And we saw this for Edvard Munch, and this Kirsten is probably being influenced by him. So we see the colors being very expressive, just like Matisse, but Matisse was a rather joyful artist compared to the German expressionists. The Germans like to feel their angst, and very soon they're going to have a lot of reason to do so. And this is, I'm just bringing this in. This is very similar to Edvard Munch. Oops, should have had an N in there. Sorry, Edvard Munch's The Bridge, right? So he had made all these bridge paintings, including The Scream is on a bridge as well. So the Brücke, has to do with like the bridge from, um, society to a better place. This is Nolde's The Last Supper. He's another German expressionist. This isn't in your book, but I feel like your book should. He's just it's a good comparison to make, to other religious scenes that we've looked at, because he has so much feeling and expression in his. You can really feel the anxiety of what's about to happen to Christ. The German expressionists are very much into printmaking. They bring back the woodblock print as a medium to be used. They think it's very, it kind of has an affinity with painting if you carve it in just a way that it looks a little, extra. Lines and textures, it kind of looks a little bit more like painting. And they find sort of the simplicity of the negative positive to be very expressive. So we have this revival of this, and the next group we look at will use this as well. The other German expressionists. So we have Die Brücke, which is the bridge, and then we have the Blue Rider, which Kandinsky will be part of. And the Blue Rider group has their own manifestos, and we're going to just look at Kandinsky and Franz Marc, who are the founding members, and they select the name because they both like the color blue and they both like horses, and that's what they said anyway. Um, so they want to elicit emotional responses from viewers, and they are concerned with the spiritual in art, and they are basing their work off of Nietzsche as well, whose famous quote is "God is dead." And he doesn't mean God is dead like he's an atheist. He means because of the state of religion and society, it seems like God must have, died and left us on our own. And that's a very simple version of Nietzsche. Don't, I'm just simplifying it for you. So Franz Marc makes paintings of the blue horse, as does Kandinsky. And you can see it has a lot, to do with, say, what Kirchner was doing, or Matisse with these heightened colors. We have a lot of primaries here. And Mark also does The Fate of Animals. This is the one from your book. And he wants to show the anxieties of oncoming war, which 1914 is the beginning of the Great War, World War One. And he writes to his wife about this painting. He has a lot of information in the book about that. What he said uh, he he was just so distraught. He writes to her from war. He gets, he's sent off to fight in the war. And he writes to her that he can't believe that he sort of foreshadowed all the horrible things that were going to come. So the painting's in 1913. In 1914, the war starts, and he actually dies in battle in 1916. Um, Working with Mark is Kandinsky, who is a Russian who moved to Munich in Germany, and painted. That's why he's considered a German expressionist. Um, and he believed that, like musicians compose music, artists must compose their paintings with color, form, line, and space to express their innermost feelings. So he likens his paintings to music. And if you get a chance, you can listen to the classical artist, the composer Stravinsky, who was very popular with a lot of artists at this time. Picasso actually drew his picture many times. Who was kind of experimental in his classical music, and if you listen to it, you'll know what I mean. Um, So he's, likening this idea that music doesn't have a subject. Nobody talks about music as, things in it like subjects to hold on to. They talk about the structure of the music or the way it's composed together when one thing comes into another. So in art, say the element of line and shape would be like, the different instruments in music. So an artist must compose his work of art based on the formal elements. And so here where we have all this line and we have shapes, organic shapes and geometric shapes, we have colors, we have primary colors, so contrasting colors. Um, we do have some depth and space, but he's really not trying to create this realistic 3D space like the Renaissance. And he titles his works based on, say, what a classical musician would. He calls them compositions, he calls them improvisations, etc., and he numbers them. So he's not giving the viewer a thing to hold on to. You can look at his work and say, well, I see, kind of a building over here, and I see, whatever. This kind of looks like eyelashes. You can try to hold on to the subject, but Kandinsky is not giving that to you. That's something you're bringing to the painting. It's an abstract painting. It's abstract expressionism, and Kandinsky really is the first to take this giant leap into the next phase of art where we've seen little by little paintings become paintings, and now walking away from the salon and all the things that the Renaissance started. This is the next step. Get rid of the subject. Why do we need a subject when a painting can be just the formal elements? So line, shape, value, texture, these things if you're an art major. Um, this is what he's composing his works for or with. Um, so he is experimenting like it's classical music, experimental classical music, but he also has this idea of synesthesia, which is people who hear colors or see colors when they see words. They have some different association. Synesthesia is when two different um, s- uh, senses are um, combined. So you hear color, or you see a color instead of read a word. It's some kind of misfiring that like combines two different things. And he believed in this, so he's trying to, make you can see color like you can hear music. So Kandinsky, one of the very first abstract expressionists, letting go of the subject and just delving into abstraction and the formal elements. Well, Katie Kolwitz doesn't go in the abstract way, but she's certainly a very expressive artist, and she expresses most of her emotions and horrific things that are happening in the world and in her life on canvas. She used all kinds of sort of printmaking techniques. You can see here all this hatching and cross hatching. So she's reviving that medium, but she has this this very Edvard Munch in her way of showing things. So she likes to show the plight of the poor, and she often showed mothers with dead children. And your book, points out that this is a common, topic. We've seen the Pieta, we saw the Michelangelo's Pieta, but this is a earlier German Pieta, which is in the 114 section, the Rotem Pieta. So, she's German. She would know this kind of tradition of, very expressive and angular, emotional scenes of Jesus and Mary. And this is a Kolwitz charcoal drawing where you can see, she has this angst and things that she wants to show. And the sad irony is the child that poses for her is her model, her child will later on in the war, when he's old enough, this is only 1903, he'll be sent off and killed in war. It's a very depressing chapter. I'm sorry. Pablo Picasso. Well, let's get maybe a little happier. Pablo Picasso grew up in Spain. He's a Spanish artist, and he moves to France eventually and befriends people and becomes Picasso himself. So, as a younger man, he was very influenced by this artist, El Greco, who we saw in the Mannerist chapter. He's sort of a Mannerist Baroque Spanish artist. And in that chapter, I pointed out we're going to remember all these kind of blue overtones and undertones that El Greco used because Picasso studied El Greco. And really, and when he was interviewed, he pays homage to him. There are two people that really, I mean, Picasso was open about all of his influences. El Greco is one of them, and later on, it will be another artist. So you can see here, this is the old guitarist. He's very much taking on these like elongated, thin limbs, pointy fingers, and then these blue undertones. So Picasso has a long period where it's called the blue period, where he does these strange, paintings with blue undertones. He liked to paint these banks. These like sort of traveling circus people. He painted several scenes of these, and more than several, dozens actually. Picasso's a guy who was extremely prolific. He made many, many, many hundreds and hundreds of paintings, and he lived a very long time. Um, and he adopted his style as he went. He adapted his style as he went. He did not, stick to one thing. He changed with the times. He was very influenced by everything around him, and he was constantly looking to move his art forward. So this is a blue period, a very early Picasso. Well, he eventually moves to France. He has a rose period, which I'm not going to cover. He moves to France, and he meets lots of people, including this woman, Gertrude Stein, who is an American woman living in France, Paris, and she befriends him. And she's actually very, very influential to modern art in a way because she and her brother and other members of her family collect modern art. And lots of them will be shipped back to the United States. So this will be giving, many museums in America the opportunity to show modern art, what will be modern then. Um, so she's collecting them. She's a writer. She's a feminist, and she holds these sort of salons at her house. And she invites everybody. Mary Cassatt was there, Matisse. Matisse and Picasso actually become great friends. Their wives are friends. Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, so writers, poets, artists, radical politicians. And, it was just like a intimate sort of place you could, air your, intelligent thoughts you can share. So it's sort of like the cafe culture of the Impressionists. And this is a portrait of Gertrude Stein that Picasso did. He actually reworked this a few times to make it seem more mask like. Picasso was influenced by um, a show that came into Paris at the Trocadero Museum, and it was a show of African artifacts. Lots of masks were there. And he had been painting this scene of these women of Avignon, and Avignon Street is a street that is known for prostitutes, or sort of like the red light district. And he goes to the show and he sees these masks, and he comes back and paints some of these masks on top of these women's faces. Um, but you can see that there are many other things going on in this scene. Picasso invents this new style called Cubism, where this is sort of like the forerunner of Cubism, where he's breaking everything into geometric shapes. He is showing multiple points of view, twisted perspective, we might call that. And what he's also doing is introducing time. He's saying, why does the canvas have to be static? If it's just a painting, why can't it be more like, say, film, which is popular at this time? Why does it have to be just one specific moment? Why does everything have to stay still? Why can't it shift? And so he's sort of experimenting with that. He's also making all kinds of quotations on, say Manet, um, and other many, female nudes that would have been shown in art history. He's very aware of what's going on. If you get a chance to watch the Khan Academy video on this, they do a great job talking about this. So he shows this, and people are a little outraged, but Picasso's a very popular guy. Um, and in your discussion board, I asked, is this influence or appropriation, this taking of these African artifacts? Um, and appropriation is when you just sort of borrow something visually that does not belong to your culture and you are misusing it for what it was meant to be. It's sort of just reducing something to what it looks like and not caring about the meaning. The question is he just being influenced by it, or is he just stealing it for his own purpose? And hopefully you had some great thoughts about that. I mean, we can see that he visually is doing something similar to that already. And when he saw these, he probably thought, "Oh, yeah, that it's very similar. I can use that." But he is using it in a way that it would not have been used. It would never have been put on a prostitute. These masks, a lot of them are sort of religious things. Um, these are actually like effigy figures here that would have things stuck in them, sort of like voodoo dolls. And this is a thing in life. If you see somebody with a certain hairdo from a place that they're not from, or um, just this idea of appropriation is a cultural question that I think is important for people to ask. George Brock befriends Picasso, and they together decide that this thing that Picasso was kind of working towards, they will expand upon and call it Cubism. And I'm going to mention here that Picasso loved the work of Cezanne, who was, as I taught it, breaking things up into geometric shapes already. He has that quote, the cube, the sphere, the cylinder, these are the things to pay attention to. And Picasso, kind of borrows that idea from him. And the writer Apollinaire says of the movement, it's the art of depicting new wholes and formal elements borrowed from not from reality of vision, but from that of conception. Everyone must agree that a chair, from whichever side it is viewed, never ceases to have four legs, a seat and a back, and that, if it is robbed of one of these elements, it is robbed of an important part. So he's saying like a chair is a chair no matter what. You can have many point of views, but it's still a chair no matter how you break it apart or whatnot. It's still a chair. So this first type of art we look at is analytic cubism, and this is the same slide I just showed. So analytic cubism deconstructs. That means it takes apart instead of constructing it, building it. It's taking apart the form. So in the case of, say, a guitar, you see that this is a part of the guitar, the strings. And then you see some shapes that might be part of the guitar. Maybe this up here is part. It's deconstructed. It's taken apart. We see here this part here. It's there. It's just not all together in one place. We see that this might be some kind of figure who might be playing the guitar, but the figure is deconstructed. So we call this um, analytic cubism, this deconstruction. So this is the first style. And what they also do is reduce the palette, reduce the color so that you can pay attention to the shapes. And we have seen this idea of a chair is a chair, no matter how you view it, before in art history. If you took 114, you would know this idea of twisted perspective. A bull is a bull. It has to have two horns, not looking at it sideways with one horn. Even if it's sideways, it needs two horns. Or the Egyptians. would never show a man, a man of any worth or money or status as standing sideways so that you only saw one leg and one arm. A man is a man with two arms and two legs. His second style of cubism is synthetic cubism, which builds the drawing with other added things. And Baroque and Picasso are the first to actually create collage. You know what collage is. I'm sure you did it as a child. They make it into an art form. They want to raise this idea of collage as an art form. And this is new, this is revolutionary. Sticking things onto a canvas. We are used to seeing multimedia things, but in this time, it was totally radical. And Picasso's famous quote about this is, "Art is a lie that helps us understand the truth." So some of these things are fake. Like this is a printout of a cane part of a chair, like a chair seat. This is an actual rope stuck to the canvas. This is painted on. And then this is meant to look like a piece of torn newspaper, but it's not. And it's starting to say the word play in it for like He's playing with the idea of illusion. What is a painting? What is paper? And whatnot. And George Braque also does a lot of collage. He literally takes labels off of things and glues them to his canvases, which again, we're used to seeing this kind of thing, but it would have been very new and radical at the time. We can see it's still, deconstructing the image. This is actually just a cutout of a pipe so that you see the paper underneath instead of the pipe being glued, the picture of a pipe being glued on top. So he's using a negative shape here. So we see this is all, multimedia. And they can apply this to sculpture as well, right? This is a maquette, which means like a model, a mock up for a guitar. So this, a paper guitar. So cubist sculpture. This is a Picasso. And this is his famous The Three Musicians. So he's using, we can see that there are figures here, but they're totally deconstructed. But it's also constructed. There's uh, some paper glued on and whatnot. So The Three Musicians. One of his more famous works is Guernica. And you can see this is 1937. It's during the war. The terrible atrocities that happened in this town of um, the Guernica is the town in the Basque region. It's the capital where 7,000 citizens are killed, killed and wounded total. So the painting, his quote is, "A painting is not made to decorate apartments. It is an instrument for offensive and defensive war against the enemy." So this painting is a response to the Nazi bombings of this region, which is a Spanish region. Again, he is a Spanish man, and you can see the bull here indicating, Spain. Um, and just you can see like all these figures, limbs cut off, people dead. He's just using cubism, and this is a gigantic canvas to, reflect the atrocities of war. And we've seen similar things. This would make a great comparison to, say, Raft of the Medusa. Maybe in the future. Speaking of the future, futurism. Futurism is an art that is going to embrace um, and glorify the new. Um, so here, express our um, life of steel, pride, and fever of speed. All forms of imitation must be despised. So they want only new things. Um, Moving objects multiply themselves in their form. So running horse has not four legs, but 20. So this idea of movement, all these things are happening. So we're going to have film actually moving. We're going to have locomotives moving, cars moving. This is the new way of life, and they're responding to art can imitate this kind of fast moving life. Plus the world is moving very quickly. It changes constantly with World War One and then soon World War Two. So they make a manifesto, and it's signed by the two artists we're going to look at. And these are, and it's an Italian movement, so Italian futurism, what's called usually. So these Italian artists call for revolution over the decline of the Italian culture. And unfortunately, they celebrate World War II with hopes of change. And I wrote fascist because the futurists become fascist and follow Mussolini eventually. And we've seen this type of thing before, showing movement. This is Muybridge from our other chapter. Remember, he was trying to solve does um, all 4 feet come off the ground at one time? And yes, you can see right in the second one they do. And then this is a prehistoric painting in the Cave of Chauvet, where they were trying to make the rhino look like it was moving. So this is a thing that people do. And the manifesto also says, we should never imitate the old. A car can symbolize movement and the modern shape rather than the Nike of Samothrace. So out with the old, in with the new. So the manifesto would be like the car is a much more valid art form than a Greek sculpture. This is Balla's Italian futurist painting Dynamism of a Dog. Oops, it should be On a Leash, sorry. And you can see, I mean, we've seen things like this now, but at the time it would have been kind of very new to show this sort of cartoony movement. Yes. And, as much as they have this big manifesto and they become fascists, this is a pretty fun painting in my mind. You see the woman's shoes and the dog. And this is Baccioni's famous Italian futurist painting, Unique Forms of Continuity in Space. And you can see he's showing this figure, a marching man. We just saw Rodin's Walking Man, marching forward, and you can see like all the wind and fabric blowing. To me, this is the very new Nike of Samothrace. She had her wings and her dress moving. Baccioni is making his own, you know, very Italian looking, embracing the new, walking boldly into the future. The next one we're going to cover is Dada or Dada. Um, so in the wake of this war, and of course World War One is just unbelievable in how much destruction and death that was caused, even in like one day. Hundreds and thousands of people are gone. It is the age of the bullet and warfare trenches and you know the rate at which people can die is astounding during this time period. So Dada, even though it sounds like it's ridiculous, is a pessimistic response to all of this. It's a contempt for convention and tradition, but also what is going on in the world. And it is literally trying to undermine all assumptions about art because the world seems just totally absurd. It's like walking through a nightmare every day. And this is at the same time that Sigmund Freud is writing about the psychoanalysis, which is the study of dreams and the subconscious and trying to tap into your inner id and your subconscious. This is a new type of therapy that is around, and Dada and Surrealism eventually will respond to this. So this is Jean Arp's collage arranged according to the laws of chance. Jean Arp liked to take a bunch of cut up paper and throw it down on the ground on a piece of paper and glue it wherever it landed. He allowed chance to, he said it tapped into your primeval power. And this was based on the writings of another analysis, Richter. Um, and he's just trying to be subversive. He's saying, all this planned composition and how things should look, this is just as relevant. This is absurdist art. This is art. I'm going to let chance, um, sort of work for me. If you have a chance, no, I don't mean chance as a pun. If you want to try this, we do this in class. The whole idea that they all land like this is a little bit absurd in my mind, because nothing's overlapping and everything seems very balanced. But it is what it is. What can I say about this piece? Marcel Duchamp is sort of like the godfather of Dada. He is an absurdist. He takes a literal urinal and he puts the name Armut on it, and he calls it the fountain. He's calling it sculpture. He's being absurd. Um, what's his point? His point is that anything can be art, originality. He's calling his art ready-mades, as if you can just go to Home Depot and the art is already made for you. And if you had to describe this, you could say it's an organic form, it's made of ceramic. You could describe it like a Greek vase, except it's not. He found it in, a plumbing store, and he signs it with a joke name. This is another one of his famous ready-mades. And you can see he's taken a copy of Mona Lisa, just a printout copy, and he's done what most third graders would do if you gave him a picture like this. He's made her, with a mustache and a goatee. But then he gives it the title, Elle should a co, which is how you say these letters in French. But what those words mean, the sounds of the letters actually sound like words, which means there is a fire down below. He's sort of making fun of Mona Lisa as a beauty, right? Like as a object in art to be looked at in this kind of way. Um, but it's absurd, and it's a ready-made that he's slightly manipulated. One of his big, called the large glasses, big sculptures, the bride stripped bare by her bachelors, even. Um, this is, you can see the sculpture. It broke when it's being transported, and he picked up every piece and glued it back on. And he considered it then finished when it was broke it. He thought the broken part made it. It was now complete. And the whole thing is just kind of absurd. There's no um, bride or bachelors. It's like these mechanical things that he's sort of referring to as those things. It's not even a canvas. It's not even a, it's it's absurdist. He's making no sense, and we'll look back at him again when we get to the Armory show. Over to the surrealist. Now, this guy's called a metaphysical painter, but you can call him a surrealist. That's fine. Giorgio de Chirico um, is the guy who did this. Whoops, I should have left his name in there. He's in your book, de Chirico. This is The Song of Love. And De Chirico is juxtaposing or putting side by side things that don't seem to make sense. He has the head of the Apollo Belvedere, which is in the Vatican. He has a giant red glove. He has a green sphere that's lit from below but has a shadow. He has these Italian piazzas, these open spaces, and then he indicates that there is a locomotive, which the surrealists like to do. And you're supposed to make some sense of it. It's supposed to be a dreamlike kind of space, where there's some kind of underlying meaning, but it's a dream. So you have to try to interpret it. And whatever you interpret it to taps into your subconscious. And that's what surrealism kind of does. So I'm sure you've had a dream where like you're in a place or something's happening where it could never happen in that place. There are things or people in your dreams that don't belong in the space that's in your dreams or whatnot. So it's this kind of weird putting together this juxtaposition of things that don't belong together. Max Ernst was also a surrealist artist, and he believed in this whole idea of ambiguity. So he gives his work these strange titles. This is Two Children Are Threatened by a Nightingale. And he actually uses multimedia. This is a wooden frame. This gate is wooden. This is a wooden part of it. This is wooden, a real knob. And then the rest is a painting that uses real traditional perspective and, whatnot. But then we have the figures here that are in black and white. So they're supposed to be more dreamlike. And then with the title, you even though it doesn't look that scary, you get this weird feeling like, what does that mean? And when you look closer, you see there's a child being abducted probably, or what's going on here. You can't see what's behind the wall there. What is this that's fallen? So it's all this sort of strangeness that you were supposed to interpret like a dream. And this comes in your book at this time because the surrealists were part of this, but really it's about a lot of the German expressionists. At this time, um, Hitler, who was a failed art student, decides he is going to round up all of the art of the German expressionists and anybody, the surrealists too, anybody he deems as degenerate. And he launches a degenerate art exhibition. And he shows hundreds of pieces he takes right from museums of these artists, not with their permission, to ridicule them, to make fun of them and say, he opens it to the public. Over 2 million people go and see it in the first month. And they're hung like, all askew, and there's like terrible things written about them on the wall. So, and this is an actual snapshot of Hitler going to see the show. And I never really know what to make about this because why did so many people went to see it, but did they all go to see it to ridicule them, or did they go to see it to see the art? I mean, it's just kind of a strange thing to do that Hitler becomes, an art curator. Uh, I guess if he couldn't make it as an artist. Um, but unfortunately, he also persecuted all of these artists, and lots of them, as your book notes, some of them flee the country, and Kirshner kills himself, and others are, thrown in prison. It's horrible. It's just a horrible time um, in the world. But that does not stop the artists from making what they feel is important art. This is probably the most famous surrealist, Salvador Dali. This is The Persistence of Memory, and I'm sure you've seen this. This is very similar to what Max Ernst was doing. You take a setting that you kind of understand, water, land, horizon, mountainish kind of things, and then you put in strange objects, melting clocks, this amorphous kind of thing that looks like eyelashes and a tongue. Is it a big eye? What is it? A bone, a cuttlefish? Uh, this is a stopwatch with ants all over it. This has a bug on it. Melting clocks, we seem like we probably can understand the idea of, he gives you this memories, melting memories. They haunt us in a way. So he's trying to make what a dream would feel like. And the thing about Dali, this is a small painting. He's super, super realistic in his style. Like everything is as if he's looking at a photograph, and he's not. He's making it up. Another famous surrealist is Rene Magritte, and I covered this in the first lecture. I talk about this as sort of poking fun of the idea of what is an image or what is an object, and we talk about paintings as if they are things. We can go back and talk about this. I'm saying clock, blah blah blah, describing everything that's in it, but really, there's nothing in it. There's paint that does different things on different things, different colors, different textures, whatnot. And Magritte is sort of calling that on the carpet here by saying, this is not a pipe, which is what this says in French. And he titles it The Treachery of Images. The foolishness of images. We can talk about this as a pipe, but it's not. It's just a picture. And Rene Magritte has he likes to call attention to the idea of looking at art and talking about art in a ridiculous way. And this is called The False Mirror. And you've probably seen this. This is pretty famous. And of course, surrealist sculpture. We have Oppenheim, Objet, and this means the breakfast in fur. And I don't know about you, but I get a really gross feeling when I look at this. Just it's this juxtaposition of materials and object that makes no sense. So that's the surrealist thing. But in this case, in my mind, it just makes it so, I don't know, icky. All right. Piet Mondrian is a distill artist. This is a Dutch group of artists that are working, and he takes what Picasso is doing, and he says, well, Cubism is not doing enough. Cubism stopped before it got to where it needed to go. It did not accept the logical consequences of its own discoveries, which meant you can have just cubes. He's kind of criticizing Picasso for holding on to the image, for letting, it still has women and it still has a woman and a guitar. Even though you deconstructed it, why did you still need the woman and the guitar? The cubes were enough. And so he calls his art pure plastic paintings. And he reduces it to just primary colors, most of his, and he has so many versions of this, many horizontal and vertical lines in black, and then the cubes in the primary colors. So he's reducing it to this total geometric abstraction, right? Mondrian or Kandinsky had his own thing with music. He was abstracting it to seem like music. Piet Mondrian is reducing it just to a basic composition. As far as sculpture goes, total abstraction is what is popular at this time. We have Brancusi. This is his marble, The Newborn. Um, and it's just a very abstract, organic, polished surface. And I don't need to over explain this. You get why he's calling it that. Same thing here, bird in space. So he's embracing this new materiality, but he is also, um, I like this quote. It says, don't look for mysteries. I give you pure joy. We get it. This is a wing, and he's calling it bird in space. It's sort of the opposite of surrealism. Like, don't try to interpret it. It's a wing. Like I'm trying to let you just enjoy this shape. Henry Moore is an English sculptor. He actually does giant sculptures. These are all over the world. These are all over this country. Actually, I've seen several of these. Um, and he often liked to make reclining women, but these big sort of biomorphic, abstracted figures. Somehow, even though his materiality is kind of chunky, I feel like he always has some kind of elegance to his sculptures. That makes a great comparison. We've seen a lot of female nude sculptures, so let's keep him in mind. And architecture, modern architecture. This is, if you want to buy a super modern house, it's still based on this type of architecture that happens um, in this time period, where the forms are starting to be reduced to just geometric. This is like a Mondrian painting come to life, and he knew all about Mondrian. As a matter of fact, instead of like the little cubes, you can move most of the walls have like panels that can be slid. All the glass things can be slid. So he's one of the first to come up with this idea of an open floor plan. If you took 114, you know that in the Gothic, that was the way that they were trying to do it. And now we're going to have the Schroeder House has already done it. And in Germany, we have the Bauhaus. This is a school of things, furniture, tapestries, all kinds of stuff. And they had all kinds of theories about, how to make art, how to make living environments. They called for simplicity and restraint. And this is highly influential to what we consider sort of the modern American style. Um, if you go to like a very deluxe like 50s house or something, it will have this kind of furniture. This is a Marcel Breuer and a Wassily chair. He comes out of the Bauhaus. So they're designing all kinds of sleek, reduced, minimal kind of things. And then I'm just going to quickly show these guys because we might come back to them when we get to American architecture. Mies van der Rohe works at the Bauhaus, and then he leaves. Um, and he will come to this country and make lots of buildings, and so will Le Corbusier. This is Villa Savoy. This is his famous house on a stilt here. And we know that these two guys definitely influenced all of the modern architecture that happened in this country. All right, next chapter, we'll get on to American art. All right, thank you.